The date of this recording is April 12th, 2023. I know it's not going to premiere for a couple weeks, but Jim, Chris, yes, we have Chris McCarver with us today, who is our special guest. We got to talk about what dropped today. Jim, go ahead and talk about what dropped today.
Yeah, what a total coincidence that we have Chris on the show tonight, right? Because it just works out that all three of us worked on the big release today. So it's April 12th, and finally, after what feels like forever, we were finally able to announce the fact that Paramount added Lower Decks to our license, which was super exciting. That they trust us with the IP and the property, and they love what we're doing with the game, and they know how respectful we are of the property, and how all the great work that all the writers and I have done over the years now, and the artists and everybody else in Modiphius. Like, it's not just me; it's clearly the whole team. We've done such a great job over the years that they gave us Lower Decks, which is super, super exciting. And we've had to sit on it. We've had to sit on that news forever. And this is a big team. I mean, there's probably, 100 people that have been involved in this thing from Modiphius and the freelancers and everybody else. That a lot of people knew about this.
Yeah.
We all managed to keep quiet about it until now. So,
right.
That StarTrek.com, for the first time in years, gave us a 2-hour exclusive window on their website to promote we sent them the press release and the art assets and stuff, and they gave us a 2-hour exclusive window for them. And then we started sending it out to all the other agencies involved for promotions. So super excited to announce that the Lower Decks is part of the Star Trek Adventures family now officially. And we've got crew packs and the standalone adventure and mission briefs and the big old honking 240-page full color hardcover coming out this summer. We're expecting to, go in pre-order in June-ish. And then we're hoping, the world being what it is, we're hoping that the book will be premiering at Gen Con. So we'll see what happens there. But more about that to come in the coming months. We've got tons of cool stuff coming up in terms of like promotions and PR and all that great stuff. So Lower Decks is here. So Lower Decks, Lower Decks, Lower Decks. I love it. It's a great show. It took me a little while to warm up to it, but I'm really digging it. And they've got season 4 coming, and they've already greenlit season 5. So we know it's going to be around for a while. So super, super excited. And thank you both. I know I'll say it again, but I want to make sure I tell you because you're both face to face right now with me. Thank you both for all your hard work on it, because it came out really, really good. And I can't wait to finally get it into your hands so we can be talking about it here real soon.
Right. And so as continuing conversations, everyone drops into this podcast in the middle of it. So let's do some quick introductions and, of course, explain why Chris McCarver, who through pure good coincidence was here for this interview today. So we're going to get a lot into his background because he's one of my favorite writers for Star Trek Adventures, writers for Star Trek, actually, the novels too. But we're going to get into his involvement in Lower Decks. But I want everyone to know that we're going to have a breakdown of the Lower Decks book in coming weeks. So we're not going to get super detailed today, but we are going to whet your appetite for it. I'm Michael Dismuke. I'm with Continuing Missions, which is the #1 site for fans for Star Trek Adventures RPG. We've been going strong since 2018. And of course, I'm a freelance writer for Star Trek Adventures. We also have with us Jim Johnson. Introduce yourself.
Yep, for sure. Hey, everybody. I'm Jim Johnson. I'm the project manager for Star Trek Adventures and the line editor for Star Trek Adventures, published by Modiphius Entertainment. These 7 years now. And we're going strong. We got plenty more stuff in the pipeline, working hard. And Lower Decks is the latest fruits of that labor, coming soon. Or actually, some of the stuff is out now, but coming soon. So just cranking away here. The machine can't be stopped. We got tons of Star Trek stuff, Star Trek Adventure stuff to come. And as long as Paramount keeps pumping out new series and keeps liking us and giving us the new series, then we'll be busy for a while here. So see what happens. But in the meantime, let's get our guests to introduce themselves. Chris, tell us a little bit about yourself. And as is traditional here on Star Trek Adventures, we need to know who your favorite captain is and your favorite Star Trek series.
Oh, that's a big one. Okay. My name is Chris McCarver. I'm one of the freelance writers for Star Trek Adventures. I've worked on the Operations Division book. the Klingon core book. I wrote the adventure that came in the Klingon GM kit, The Sleeping Beast. Also worked on the Discovery book, and as I was just announced, I also worked on the Lower Decks crew packs for seasons 1 and 2, as well as the campaign guide. And in addition to that, I'm also a writer for Marvel Comics. I mainly do reference guides for stuff like the Marvel Universe handbooks, the MCU guidebooks, and actually, I just recently did a slight contribution to the Marvel Multiverse RPG that Marvel is doing. Although it was admittedly a small contribution. I helped pick out art for it, but I was glad to be a part of it in any case.
Okay, well, I'm going to talk about my history with you, Chris, knowing you, because when I came into Star Trek Adventures in 2017, 2018, I was like, okay, this is new to me. I had never played anything but Marvel Superheroes RPG and all the iterations of it afterwards, Margaret Weiss, all that stuff. Mm-hmm. When I found out you were a writer for Star Trek Adventures, I remember I reached out to you because I'm a big Marvel fan. And so today I really want to dig into your background, find out about you, a little bit more about your Marvel side, and then actually how you met Jim and ended up working for Star Trek Adventures. That's going to be a big point of interest for me. Good. So maybe I can start with how did you first start writing for RPGs in general? Was it Star Trek Adventures your first one, or were you already involved with others?
Star Trek Adventures was my first RPG.
You know what? Wait, I'm stopping myself because Jim is laughing at me. I'm so excited because you still didn't answer who your favorite captain.
We'll get to that. Okay,
okay, Jim, just stop me. Jim, shut me up. You know what? Wait, can everyone know? I need to say something, and then I'm going to step back, and this is the reason why. Jim knows I have been so excited all day because the Lower Decks, I've been sitting on it like the woman from SNL who eats pillows because I've been dying so hard to talk about Lower Decks. When it released today, he knows I was frenetic and crazy. So I'm going to shut up now. And Chris, I'm going to give it over to you. Answer Jim's question. I'll just be quiet.
Okay. Sure. So as far as my favorite Star Trek captain and series, it actually is this. I can say it in both breaths. Cisco DS9. I love original series. I love all the Star Trek shows, and TOS and TNG have like huge places in my heart. But DS9 is for me the most groundbreaking series in the franchise, and I challenge any new Star Trek show to do what DS9 did. And I think it's still possible, and I want to see more of what DS9 did in Star Trek storytelling.
Why? Talk to me about that. What did it do for you?
For me, it was the balance of showing the Federation perspective versus the non-Federation perspective. We basically saw the Federation trying to coexist with a culture that has not benefited from their influence and almost sees them as something of an intrusion almost, especially in the first few seasons where you'd see like Kira and Cisco kind of have a clash of philosophies in terms of how to run things. And of course, once the Dominion War got kicked off, I mean, it just went straight serialization where, not everything was wrapped up at the end of the episode. And there were so many episodes that ended in shades of gray that, you typically, before then, Star Trek was very much problem of the week. Everything got wrapped up. There were through lines that would like carry over into later episodes. There were story threads we picked up like maybe like a few episodes later or a few seasons later, but DS9 just kind of kept going, and it was just kind of like this endless chain up until right when the final episode aired. And I like the balance that they came with, trying to do one-off, done in one stories as well as the serialization. Especially when the Dominion War thing kicked off, because it could have put just completely overshadowed everything. Mm-hmm. But they still had moments where you could do episodes like the Magnificent Ferengi or the Vic Fontaine episodes, or just, anytime you want to just like, hey, we know that like the Dominion War is terrible and it's an important thing that we need to get a handle on, but we also realize that we're a TV show and we're here to entertain, and eventually we just need to do something a little silly and just kind of break the tension. I can't remember the name of the episode, but the one I always go back to was the episode where Nog comes back after his leg is amputated. Mm-hmm. And I've never seen just him dealing with that, or rather not dealing with that, and coming to terms with his injury. That's not something I've seen in Star Trek much, and it really kind of affected me, especially considering like we no longer have Aaron Eisenberg anymore. I mean, in a physical sense, but I love the themes. I love the juxtaposition. I love the gigantic supporting cast. Yeah. I mean, it wasn't just about the names that were on the opening credits. I mean, you look at Garrick, you look at Ducat, you look at Kai Wynn, you look at Eddington, all of these characters that meant as much to the story as Sisko and Kira and Odo. And I think that was Star Trek writ large for years to come.
Well, I think too, what's amazing compared to the other series is Deep Space Nine. When you look at what Jackson Lansing and Colin Kelly are doing in the comics now, where they're bringing Sisko, it ended, the last episode of Deep Space Nine did not satisfy me. I want to know where the heck is Sisko and what's up with the Dominion. So we're seeing resolve now in the modern comic books, and we're seeing resolve in Picard season 3 with the Dominion, which is really epic, I think, for Star Trek. Don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. I actually met Jack I met Jackson Lansing in Seattle at Emerald City Comic Con. I mentioned nice. I worked on Star Trek Adventures, and because he was telling the story around a group of people about like this gigantic epic Star Trek RPG that he was running. This was pre the release of STA, and he was actually running 2 simultaneous groups in the same campaign, like one Federation crew and one Klingon crew, I think he said. And I'm just listening to the story, and I just happened to mention I worked on Star Trek Adventures. He says, "Hey, I like what you guys are doing," and he's like, "So I'm glad that I would like to have better, more conversation." I mean, he's writing Captain America now for Marvel, so I mean,
and Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yes. No Marvel book could be better suited for his talents, I think.
Yeah, he's fortunately graced us with his presence on this show, especially when it came to the IDW publishing the 5-year, the Star Trek Year 5. He came on, so we had a really good introduction with him. So that's cool. You're all kind of melding between Star Trek and the Marvel world, which is really fun.
It's all connected. Yeah. So Chris, that Nog episode is It's Only a Paper Moon, and it reminded me a little bit of Brothers, the Next Gen episode where Picard has to deal with the fallout from being Locutus for a while. That's really cool that Star Trek on TV it was network television, right, or syndicated television. It's really cool that they were willing to take a whole episode to do that kind of an episode, right? Instead of doing like, oh, we're going to go to the planet of the week and go deal with the alien of the week or whatever. We're going to actually focus on the characters and actually show that there can be repercussions from what happened in the episodes before, which I think is super powerful storytelling. And that's why I love DS9 so much. That's my favorite series. For that exact reason, is that they had to deal with the stuff that they created week in and week out, right? They were stuck around Bajor, right? They couldn't just go off warping away to the next planet or whatever, right? They had to deal with the problems that were there. Kind of like, for the most part, real life, right? Like you can't just escape your problems that you leave behind, right? And I think this is probably a topic for a different show, Michael. So we can add this to the list, our ongoing list of stuff. But and not to be too much of a DS9 homer, but I know I totally am. I think DS9 is a really good model for a role playing game campaign for those very reasons that you mentioned, Chris. You get the big supporting cast of recurring characters. Like I think of all the great campaigns I've run or been in, whether it's D&D or Star Trek or something else, it was always the supporting characters that the players were excited to see come back, right? You always wanted to see your favorite villains or allies or just like the quirky characters. It was always nice to see them come back and make an appearance because you're like, you hear the game master go into their voice, right? And you're like, oh, this is going to be a fun episode. Such and such character is in the session tonight. And then, and that's exactly how I felt when Wei Yun would show up, or even Jeffrey Combs just playing another character, right? Or Brunt or whatever. It's like, oh yeah, this is going to be a cool Kai Wen episode or something. And I think game masters would really benefit from looking at that and saying, look, bring in those recurring characters, bring in those supporting characters, and also don't let your players get away with murder, right? Like if they do something heinous in an episode, make them stick around for a couple of sessions and see what the fallout is. Make them think about the consequences of their actions, as opposed to just like, oh well, we got to go off warp 9 off to the next planet. So anyway, I digress, but I think that might be a good topic for a future episode, just to talk about.
We'll probably wrap it in here somehow, because I know we're coming off of some episodes where we actually talked about how to build amazing adversaries. Yeah. And so we'll talk about that. I want to talk, Chris, again, I'm going to go into my Marvel fanboy for a little bit, because my sure. dream originally was to write for Marvel like everybody else. Well, I'm not going to speak for everyone, for like a lot of people. And so talk to us, how did you get involved initially writing for Marvel?
Well, it's kind of an interesting story. I was a frequenter of this forum called the Marvel Chronology Project, which if you go there, it's on chronologyproject.com. It's still up and being updated. It's basically an index of chronological appearance lists for every major Marvel character. I mean, I actually compiled the whole thing into an Excel sheet, and it was like 120,000 lines.
Wow.
But several of the writers for this series that Marvel was doing, called the Official Index of the Marvel Universe, which was basically an issue by issue summary of a certain series. They covered like they did 3 volumes of them. The first one was Amazing Spider-Man, Uncanny X-Men, and Iron Man. And the second one that was in production when this happened was covering Avengers, Captain America, and Thor. A lot of the writers were also on that forum, and I would chat them up in a little bit. And I misspoke. The first volume was still in production when I was on the forum, and it was, the thing about the MCP is it's usually about like 5 years or so out of date, because they want to let stories reach their conclusion before they decide where they go on the list. And when it came time to work on the later issues of the first volume, they were using the MCP as a resource, but they were getting to the later stuff that the MCP hadn't covered. But people had done research. There was stuff in the forums saying, okay, we corral guys this. These are all of Wolverine's appearances. These are all of Cyclops' appearances. They just hadn't been loaded in. And one of the writers from the index came in and said, hey, I need some help figuring out these characters' appearances for this run of X-Men books. And I basically took I basically compiled all the research that had been made thus far, and I made some inquiries and just see where everybody's consensus was on this. I put the whole thing in an Excel sheet, And then I basically did some trickery to basically, kind of, see, okay, so that goes there, that goes there, that goes there, that goes there. And I managed to like come up with like lists for like 10 characters. And I basically just gave it to this guy. And that got me a special thanks credit in the next couple of issues for that book and a job offer shortly thereafter.
The reason I like asking, the reason I want, let me ask you a question. I'm going to tell you why people who are listening to this need to listen to this. But did you have an involvement also with the appendix to the Handbook of the Marvel Universe online? I think I saw your name there.
Well, I think I've done some stuff that's been, I think I have done some stuff for that. It's honestly, I've done so much of this stuff. It's kind of hard to keep track.
Yeah.
But Jeff Christensen, who is the guy who runs the appendix, is one of our writers.
Yes.
Jeff is a cool guy in and of himself. He's a veterinary surgeon, for crying out loud. In addition to being a Marvel expert.
Mm-hmm.
Which is cool because we got him and we've got Mike Ficara, who's an engineer in his daily life. So we've got whenever we need to do quasi scientific explanations for things, or like try to figure out how much stuff weighs, or how much like a character's strength level should be like how much they can lift. We've got people with actual scientific backgrounds that could apply that.
The reason I asked that, Chris, the reason, and people who are listening, why I'm framing this question, and me and Jim have talked about it before. When you're passionate about something, you write a lot about it. You kind of just put stuff out there, and then they approach you. And I just do that because Jim was nice enough to notice me at some point, and then give me the privilege to write. And you were writing stuff, and you got noticed. And so I really like people to tune in on that story. If you want to be a writer, just put yourself out there, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
It's the same. Yeah, no, go ahead, Chris.
Go ahead. I was just gonna say that. Well, it was mainly just agreeing there with Michael that it's so much of it is self-promotion, especially if you want to get started. I come back. It used to be back in the day that it was possible, highly unlikely, but possible, that to basically just send in artwork or send in stories to Marvel, to DC, to any major comic book publisher, and you might stand a chance of them responding to you, or sending you some kind of critique. Usually you'd get a boilerplate rejection letter in the mail. But lately, Marvel's thing, and I think DC's thing right now, is basically saying, put your own comics out there. We'll come find you.
I had a meeting with Bill Jemas in 2003. He was the editor-in-chief of Marvel at that time. And that's exactly what he told me. And I walked out depressed, but then it put me to work, because I was like, let me do something then. Let me put something out there. And I did, and I published it. And that what you're saying is true. People need to know, just get stuff out there.
Yeah. And honestly, if you're putting your own stuff out there, you're probably you might even do better than if you did with working for one of the big companies. I mean, look at The Walking Dead. I mean, that was like an indie book that was just published by Image. Next, and it had, I mean, apart from it being published by the third largest comic book publisher in the country, it was basically a one-man band. Apart from Robert Kirkman was the writer, Tony Moore and Charlie Adler did the art, but it was basically the same team putting out just a comic book of the zombie movie that never ends, and it became this media juggernaut. I mean, the TV show is going to end after 15 seasons. We got 2 more shows coming out later. I mean, you may come up with the next Walking Dead or the next Last of Us, or heck, I don't know how many like Image comics have been made into like TV or movies, like Deadly Class and so many others.
Yeah, well, Comic-Con now, when you go to any con now, you have people shopping for the next TV show or Netflix series. I remember I was privileged to meet the writers and artists for Whiteout, and then all of a sudden, 3 years later, I'm like, oh my God, they're on Netflix, which I was I have their signed book, and I just thought that was so cool to be in that experience.
I miss going to cons so much. I actually, I haven't been to a convention since Gen Con 2019. I was actually planning to go to Gen Con the next year because, I mean, as fun as it was, and I got to meet Jim that year, it actually went really, really wrong on a couple of occasions. My then wife and I had gotten to Indianapolis and realized we'd left our badges at home.
Oh, wow.
And we had to drive back to Springfield, Missouri, and basically spend 24 hours on the road there and back. And then the next day, while we were waiting for food in the food court park, I pass out from and end up going to the emergency room.
Oh no.
So we decided we decided we wanted to do it again as a do-over, but then certain things happened, and now I'm sitting on some store credit right now.
Wow. So how did you and Jim meet then? Jim, Chris, how did this happen where you end up working for Star Trek Adventures then?
Well, it actually predates my meeting Jim. Actually, I had seen I can't remember where I saw the article, but I'd heard that Modiphius had gotten the license to do a Star Trek RPG, which has been, something I've actually, like, I don't know how many like RPG systems I've converted to Star Trek in my life, just as like technical exercises. I've converted Marvel Superheroes, Cortex, D20, West End Star Wars, all of that. I've tried to just basically, okay, so this is how a Galaxy class would be. So, but I saw the article, and and they said we're looking for writers, and I was like, well, that's okay. So I decided to say, I sent out an email. I got an email from Chris Birch saying, hey, we'd love to have you, sure. And then about a month or two later, I got an email from Sam Webb, and he and she put me on the operations division book, and then it just kind of, and then I think a couple years later, I ran into Jim at Gen Con. Next thing I know, I'm working on some more stuff. I got to do some NPC write-ups for the Klingon core book. And then I got to do the Sleeping Beast, which I'm particularly proud about the Sleeping Beast, because that's like the first thing I've ever like written solo. In a very long time. Most of the stuff that I've written, like from all the stuff I've written for Marvel, has been a team exercise, and honestly, I am thankful for that, because the Handbook crew are a great bunch of guys, and I love. I think whatever deities are staring down, that I get to work with such great teams on both the franchises I write for.
So awesome. Jim, Jim, again, I'm going to fanboy, because anyone who writes for Marvel is like a dream for me. So when you had the opportunity to continue using Chris, you've used him since you've been project manager on the Klingon Core rulebook and Lower Decks, right?
Yeah. Well, also of course, the adventure for the Klingon toolkit. And I think we've got a couple other projects coming up that you were involved in that we haven't announced yet.
Right.
Plus, I think I may have seen some pitches from you for mission briefs or standalones. I'm not sure. I can't remember so much stuff.
Well, I also worked on the Discovery book.
Yes, the Discovery book. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. Do you? I'm going to ask too, as a from a person who's played different RPGs, what do you find different about Star Trek Adventures in comparison to other RPGs? If you were to highlight the differences to someone coming into the game.
For me, I've always kind of pointed to the fact that it's it's a cooperative game first and foremost. Most RPGs, and I don't mean this as a knock against any of them. I love. There's so many other like systems and game settings that I've been happy to be part of. But one thing I like about Star Trek Adventures is that it is a teamwork based adventure. You're there to basically get together and solve a problem, and most importantly, work together to solve that problem. Well, I mean, the fact that like the momentum pool is a group mechanic, that I think that says so much about like, because there have been, I mean, we're like the fourth or RSTA is like the fourth or fifth official Star Trek game, and I think this is the first. And not a knock against those previous systems, but I think this is like the first time that I've actually seen like the emphasis on we're here to solve a problem and we're here to do it together. And I think that's always been the hallmark of the franchise's fiction, is that we come to a place, there's a problem, what can we do to solve it? And it's not about this player is going to basically, he's going to try to do it better than everybody else, or this is the best. It's not a reward based thing either. It's about doing the right thing for the right reasons. And I think there's something, for want of a cliche term, beautiful about that. That that's one of the reasons I like cooperative board games as well. Like Pandemic or the Forbidden games. I like the idea that we're getting around the table to not necessarily compete or to win, but we're here to work in tandem and raise each other up towards this goal. And I love the fact that STA not only mechanicizes a lot of that, but that it heavily encourages it.
So I'm going to ask Jim and you a philosophical question now, because of what you just said, in the nature of the collaborative game. Why do you think that's more timely now than ever? Because I do notice a shift in. We've had entire episodes about playing games where violence isn't the focus and it's more of a collaborative focus. We've had some shows about that. So I'm curious to hear both Chris, you and Jim, your opinion as to why you think collaborative touches a nerve nowadays more than ever.
I honestly think that I think now more than ever, there are people who are coming to terms with the fact that we as a people need to look at what unites us rather than what divides us. And I think by exploring that need in our entertainment, in our recreation, is the first step to, basically employing those principles in our daily lives. And as much, I think that I think it's very important that Star Trek's principles of coexistence, of bettering the whole as well as the individual. I think that that's a very important concept that we as a people should hold dear. And the fact that our media and our forms of recreation are starting to and here's where I lose my vocabulary.
Embody
that. Yes, thank you very much. The fact that our media and our recreation is starting to embody that is very, very important, and I think is something we desperately need and should be glad to have.
Yeah, Jim.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think there is, especially in the last, I don't know, 10 years or so, there's been so much cynicism and divisiveness in not just the country, but in the world, that for a long time, when I first got involved with Star Trek Adventures, in the back of my mind, I was like, is Star Trek even still relevant? Right. In this cynical 21st century, like, do we even care about Star Trek? Is it kind of like that nice hokey wish that we had back in the day, where we could all work together as a planet and strive for something better, where we're all lifelong learners and working together to better each other and ourselves and stuff? Is that even possible anymore? And it's been a challenge to like see that, but like I do see it, and especially I see it in the younger generation more than anything else. I think I mean certainly there are pockets of boomers and Gen X and myself and everybody else that certainly want to be striving towards something better than what we have, right? And I think I see that in a lot of media, like Chris was saying. And I mean that's just true to the Star Trek ideal, right? Of working together. Like every episode, they're working together as a team. And if they don't work together as a team, something goes wrong, and sometimes something goes fatally wrong, and then they have to deal with it. But I just love the fact that Nathan built all those mechanics right into the system to really encourage teamwork and partnership and cooperation, not just the momentum tool, the pool that's available, but like a lot of the talents and role abilities play off of each other, right? So it's not just, oh, I'm a cool character doing my cool stuff, and you're a cool character doing your stuff, and we're all kind of in the same combat together or in the same situation together, and we're making it work. But where there's actually synergies built into the characters, and everybody can be awesome in their own way. And I don't know that there's necessarily like the traditional niche protection in Star Trek Adventures that you see in other games, where you got your rogue, and you got your warrior, and you got your thing. There's a lot more flexibility, I think, in Star Trek Adventures that really lends itself to really different groups of characters still being able to be successful together. And I think, over the last 7 years, I'm really excited that you all as writers have really taken on the challenge that I've thrown at you to like expand the game, right? And add more options so that it's not just Starfleet, right? It's Starfleet and it's Klingons and it's civilians and it's Ferengi, and you can play all kinds of different characters now, like any character from the franchise you can play in the game now. And that's diversity at its heart, right? That's Star Trek, right? Like anybody from any walk of life in the Star Trek, IP, you can create a character like them or something completely original and still find something to do and still feel welcome at the table. And that's something I don't see a lot in other games. Like sometimes it's implicit, but I don't like. I feel like Nathan baked it right into the game, and that's just a testament to what Star Trek is, right? In the ideal sense.
Well, I think too, and I'm curious both of your opinion on this, but Jim, I think to what you just said, I find myself when I'm writing now for Star Trek Adventures to try to see if I can write an entire module or mission brief with no violence at all. Like if it goes there, let it go there. But can I be creative enough to push myself to create a provocative story that draws people in on some sort of scientific or emotional or moral conundrum? And I love that personal challenge. Like, what is entertainment? Like, why do we fall back? I personally try not to. I don't fall back on sex or violence, or vulgarity. We've talked about that before. It's like, and Star Trek Adventures is pushing me to be a better writer. And what gets people hooked? What do you both think about that when you're coming up with your writing scenarios? Because you both write a lot too.
Well, getting back, the funny thing, it's funny you mentioned that because because I actually kind of baked that into the Sleeping Beast, the Klingon adventure I wrote in, because I actually wrote it in a way that you could like tackle it from two different directions. Quick summary. Basically, an asteroid's about to basically destroy a Klingon agricultural planet. You are the second Klingon crew to try to stop this thing because the first one vanished. And you find out that there's more to this asteroid than just being a gigantic rock about to hit an important planet. And I wanted to basically, because you're playing Klingons, so obviously, there's the there's the possibility and even in the likelihood that you're just going to try to blow this thing up and go home and and drink your victory, but but I also wanted to present a scientific solution. So I kind of made it kind of a choose your own adventure style of adventure, to where, if even if you were playing as a Klingon, maybe you're a Klingon scientist, or you're a Klingon doctor, or or a Klingon engineer, and maybe you want to try and think this problem out instead of punching it. And I think, getting back to your original question, I think that's always the goal for me in because I've done I think about a bunch of mission briefs for various projects, released and otherwise, and that's always the thing, is like, do I want to. I tend to fall back on trying to make it solving a mystery. I've written a number of mission briefs that almost read like a police procedural, because I used to be a huge cop show nerd, back when the days of Homicide: Life on the Street and NYPD Blue, but I always want to like to come at it as, yes, this is bad. This could get worse. How do we figure this out? Because we can't just like set our phasers to setting 16 and solve this problem. It's got to be thought out. And I think that's part and parcel. What the engine of a good Star Trek story is figuring out the solution, and figuring out that you're going to have to use your brain to figure this one out.
Yeah. And I think that from what I've seen, I'll let Jim comment, and I'll talk about what I've noticed with new players who don't go into violent video games or violent board games, what they've been doing around the table. Jim, what about your intention when you're writing?
Yeah, I mean, I agree completely with everything Chris has been saying. I think Star Trek, by and large, most Star Trek episodes are a mystery, right? They present a mystery, and then you go through the episode and you try to solve it. You try to figure out what's caused it, who caused it, whatever. And by the end of it, hopefully you get a satisfying conclusion. Or with more recent Star Trek series, it's just a continuing story over the course of a season. And then hopefully you get the answer by the end of it. But that's just an extended form of storytelling, right? But like in the traditional mode where it was episodic, like original series, Next Gen especially, most of those episodes are mysteries, right? There's a question that comes up in the teaser or in the first act, and then the rest of the episode is them trying to figure out, okay, what's the answer, what's the solution? And most of the time, combat is incidental. Like a fight sometimes may happen, but it's not always the only way to solve a problem, and that's just life. Right, like there's always other ways to solve things than just beating somebody up or shooting somebody or whatever, right? Like sometimes that's the easy way, right, or the easy way, but ultimately it's really not. But I know, so as a writer, like I really try to get creative and try to like give players and game masters a lot of options. Like I really completely bought into the whole toolkit idea of when I'm writing an adventure or I'm working on a book with all you guys. And ladies and everybody else. I don't want to like, especially with like Shackleton, right? I didn't want to just put together a campaign and say, here's what happens, A, B, C, D, E, all the way to Z. You do that, you're done. And because I didn't like those kind of campaigns when I was growing up and doing other games and stuff. I wanted to feel like I had more agency as a game master and as a player. And I was like, you know what? I'd really rather just have the company throw me a whole bunch of tools, a whole bunch of non-player characters, a whole bunch of plot hooks, seeds, ideas, ships, stuff, and let me figure out with my group how we want to put it all together. And, sometimes we may come up with a similar story to the one that you ran or the one that you ran, but maybe they're completely different. Like, we take the same module for Star Trek and we could go 3 completely different directions with it based on not just our crews and our personalities, but just like how it all plays out in any given night with dice rolls. And, sometimes your players are hot, sometimes they're cold. Sometimes the dice hate you. Sometimes the dice love you, right? And that all shapes the narrative that you end up making. So I try to keep all of that in mind. And it's a balancing act, right? Because you want to be really creative, but at the same time, sometimes you just got to get it done on deadline, right? So you can't get too creative sometimes. But I remember working on the mini campaign for the tricorder set. I really intentionally challenged myself to make combat be the absolute last option to solve the problem. And certainly there, I put in, it was almost a sidebar to say, oh, if your group needs more action, add this and this and this, and like keep the Klingons alive, keep the Orions alive, and keep them around, and bring them in when appropriate. But don't feel like you have to, right? Like if your group wants that kind of thing, sure, there's an option here to bring them in. But it wasn't me mandating to them at this point in the story they must have an encounter with the Orions, or they must have this random encounter with Klingons or whatever. It's like these are just options to throw in, salt, seasoned to taste, whatever. And I really have been trying to encourage all the writers to do that too on Star Trek. I mean, you guys already do it naturally, and Al and Aaron and a bunch of the other regulars that we have. But like I take pitches all the time from writers, new writers and experienced writers, because that's just how I think we need to run the line. Like diversity is key to me, and I want even more diverse voices on the line, right? And so I'll take pitches from anybody, but a lot of times, especially from newer writers, I will read pitches, and like usually their default option to solve the problem is to get into a fight, right? And it's like, yeah, okay, so that's fine, but I want to push you. I want to, because it's my job as an editor. I feel like I want to push writers to stretch themselves, right? Not necessarily to be better, but just to stretch themselves and think outside the box a little bit, right? So I really try to encourage them, and sometimes I give them feedback and I never hear back from them again, and that just happens, right? Whether there's a writer ego in the way or they just don't know how to push through or whatever. But sometimes I'll get a pitch back and be like, oh yeah, this is really different and this is great. I'm willing to commission this now because you've given me something different, and me trying to think ahead to like the game masters and players that are out there who are going to get this product and be like, oh, I can do something with this that's not just we tried to solve the mystery and we couldn't solve the mystery, so now we're just going to fight the Romulans.
Yeah, and that's why I want. Yeah, and I want to talk. Constantly on the show, Chris too. I don't know if you've seen some of the episodes with me and Jim, but with the operations division supplement, you've worked on the Discovery campaign guide. You've worked on the Klingon core rulebook, and we do riff episodes where like, let's create adventures off of one paragraph. So I don't know exactly what paragraph you wrote in any of these, but we always end up picking these very nonviolent paragraphs and come up with these epic episodes because it's about the scientific explanation or the diplomatic thing. I'll say, again, I don't know exactly what you did in the Discovery book, but I told Jim that I actually wasn't a big fan of Discovery until the Discovery supplement came out. I was like, wait, I got to go back and watch this. I missed a lot. And to me, that was the power of the work you've done, work other collaborators have done to show that Star Trek is so much more than pew pew, but it's really, and that goes back to my players. I'll talk about the players who haven't even watched Star Trek, who are not into violent gaming, who sat around and started playing with me Star Trek Adventures post-pandemic at the table. They sit there and they talk for 20, 30 minutes without me even doing anything because they're into the moral quandary and into the perplexity and conundrums and labyrinths that we've created through this game. So again, that is to me Star Trek Adventures. I know you want to say something. You were going to say something. I interrupted you. Go ahead. No. I'm just nodding along at this point. But So basically, you just take a paragraph from like one or more of the books, and you build it up. So, okay, yeah. We'll do a riff because the way Jim was talking about how it's designed now is you're not designing for pew pew or action or get to the fight, but we're designing conundrums for people to solve, which to me is, going back to my original question, is more reflective of the societal problems that we're dealing with nowadays. People are finally getting to the point where violence only breeds death. That's all it's going to do is death. Yeah. It's not the solution to the problem. And so Star Trek Adventures is more leaning toward that kind of mindset.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sorry.
This is what editing is for. Don't worry, our guy Jeff will edit this perfectly.
Awesome. Okay, so
let me simplify a question for you. Again, nowadays, again, I think the point we're trying to ask you about, why does Star Trek really ring the chord for you as to where gaming should go, or why the stories are so relevant now more than ever?
I think it boils down. I mean, Jim said it earlier. I mean, the last 10 years, I've actually been kind of note, because I don't watch a lot of television these days. Largely because of the just a gigantic amount of like choices that there are. But I've been noticing that a lot of the shows, this is not a denouncement of anybody who's been on those shows or who's made them. I hold no malice, but a lot of those shows, the best ones, the ones that are considered the best ones, are the ones of horrible people being horrible. And this goes back to like The Sopranos, Breaking Bad, Boardwalk Empire. And I'm not going strictly after HBO on this, but the Dahmer docu-series, and I just think that it's important that we show humanity as at its best as much as we show it as its worst. And I almost feel like we're finding more the needle is going the direction it going too far in one direction, and we kind of like need to balance the scales a little bit. But I think that like Jim was saying, the last decade or so, we can become more cynical in just our public discourse. Not just in media, not just in gaming, just overall. And the fact that if there's a place we can go to where we can say, let's be better, let's be good people, let's show each other that we can cooperate, we can coexist, we can strive to be a better version of ourselves. And I think that as far as Trek is concerned, I mean, that's been the engine of Star Trek is, let's solve the problem, but let's not forget who we are as people in over the course of this endeavor.
Right. It's totally in that again, a game like nothing else, that I've seen. And now, even with so much more Trek out there, I mean, we have 5 series live right now, 5 series going on right now. And not even to mention the countless comic books and novels and audibles coming out, which I can't keep up with anymore. There's so much diversity, out there, which leads me actually to a question. I happen to know from interviewing you before that one of your favorite novel series was the Titan novels. So talk to me how it feels right now to see that on screen. What are you thinking?
Well, it's obviously it's a different take on the Titan than the books did, because obviously the lit verse is sadly gone. Thank you, Star Trek Coda. But I loved what they did with the Titan in the novels, in as much as they tried to make it a truly culturally diverse crew. It was, there were only 15% of the crew were human. Not all of them were humanoid. Not all of them were air breathers. Not all of them were fully suited to like 1G gravity. And I mean, obviously with, you could probably do that on Prodigy or Lower Decks now, but I mean, but obviously given, like effects and makeup budgets, it's kind of difficult to do that on a weekly television show. Right. But, seeing one interpretation of that, was honestly kind of a nice change, and to be honest, I do like the interpretation of the Titan as we've seen on Lower Decks and on Picard. I mean, obviously we're kind of talking about two different ships, but I mean, at the same time, when the Titan showed up, spoilers, on the season 1 finale of Lower Decks, my grin probably like stretched to like twice the width of my face. I was just like, oh my, and then I heard Jonathan Frakes' voice and Marina Sirtis' voice, and I was just like, oh my God, I'm home.
That's so awesome. Everyone's dreaming because all this RPG comics novels are starting to bleed into the cinematic universe and that episodic universe. I knew I wanted to ask you that question about the Titan.
Oh yeah. Cool. I'm happy to see her. I'm happy to see her in real life, and honestly, I love the design of the A. I love the Luna class. I mean, if I was to run a game, I would heavily push the Luna class as a hero ship. Yeah. But I do love. I like the kind of the Constitution style configuration of like saucer section engineering with 2 upswept nacelles. That's always going to be a classic for me.
Yeah, it's a good look. And you even did some stuff on Geek and Sundry you did some art, right? You do art.
Yes. So when the group that is currently known as the Streampunks started up Shield of Tomorrow, I actually started watching Shield of Tomorrow because I had just gotten the gig to work on Star Trek Adventures like a couple of weeks before Shield of Tomorrow premiered, and I was gearing up. I was gearing up for it because I hadn't gotten my materials yet. I think Sam sent me a kind of like a starter set primer of the rules. The core book hadn't even come out yet. But then Shield Tomorrow started up, and I was like, well, they're going to play this game, and so I might as well watch it to kind of get a feel for how the rules go. Because I'd never heard of Twitch before. I'd never heard of Geek and Sundry before. I mean, I heard them in passing because I'm a huge fan of Felicia Day and Will Wheaton and whatnot. But I started watching, and it kind of became my weekly thing because I know a lot of people love Critical Role, but I had that same love for Shield of Tomorrow. I mean, it was like it almost re-sparked my love of Star Trek. Almost. I mean, I was already a hardcore fan, but Shield of Tomorrow was like, oh my God, I missed having Star Trek I didn't realize how much I missed having Star Trek on a weekly basis until Shield of Tomorrow started. But I remember because I draw a little bit too, and I did some fan art, and the players commented on the piece because I posted up on Twitter. I think it's like my second highest engaged Twitter post that I've made.
That's cool. So I have to ask, so Jim, the more we do the show, this is like our 70-something episode here. Do you keep finding that Star Trek Adventures kind of is becoming this weird central nexus of all these different creative types for Star Trek?
Yeah, I mean, I think the more we do, and the more I manage to convince people to get involved in the game, whether it's like Thomas Maroney over at Star Trek Online, the more he offers to help us out with artwork and stuff and get him involved. And then his Rolodex of people, he reaches out and I get more of them involved. And then like we got Jackson Lansing and we got Jody and we got some other people involved. And then we got Shield, Starship Tempest the other week. We got them on the show. We talked to them. It's like, as we continue to do the game and as we continue to release more stuff and we get more people in working on the game on all the different, categories, whether it's writing or art or layout or whatever. Like it's really cool. And I'll admit, Michael, I just drew a blank on what your question was.
It was.
I was riffing, and now I just drew a blank. So
Central Nexus. Talking about Star Trek Adventures. Yeah.
So and I brought my own. I mean, when I first got involved in the game in 2016, when it was still in playtest, right? Even pre-playtest. I was a fiction writer primarily, and I had a few Star Trek, small Star Trek credits to my name. The short stories and the novella in one of the anthologies. But by virtue of having had that experience, I had a Rolodex of Star Trek writers who are friends and who I knew, and I had other connections. And when I talked to Chris and said, "Hey, look, I want to write for the game," and oh, by the way, I happen to know Scott Pearson, who's the copy editor for Simon and Schuster. He could give us a lift on canon because he's already familiar with all the people that approve all this stuff. And it's like, well, yeah, that's a no-brainer. And oh, by the way, I know Dayton Ward, who's a New York Times bestselling author of Star Trek novels. You want him involved? Sure. Yeah, get him involved. And so the more we do that collectively, and like I see you guys doing it too, because like you guys reach out to people on Twitter and on social media, and you're having your own independent conversations, which is, just life. But like the more people in the Star Trek universe that we're able to draw in, it's like you said it earlier, Michael, it's really starting to blur the line between the novels and the game and Star Trek Online and the comic books and even canon to some extent, where like when Thomas was able to give us the artwork for 6 of the Star Trek Online ships to use in Utopia Planitia, and we didn't find out until we were almost ready to go to print that all those ships that he provided us were actually going to be canonized in Picard season 2 at the end of the season. And I was like, holy crap, this is like instant credibility for Star Trek Adventures, because not only do we have some cool Star Trek Online ships in the game, but now that they're actually on screen now, right? So that was a connection that we didn't have before that just kind of fell into our lap because we had that great connection with Thomas. And I am hungry to do more stuff like that. Like I really want to get Jody and Jackson involved in the game again so we can do more stuff with IDW, because they're doing some great stuff over there. And it's just like, how do we make it work? How do we fit it into the timeline and into the production schedule? And how do we make those connections so that we can do more stuff with the folks doing Star Trek Timelines and the folks doing Star Trek Online and the comic books and just all these other licensees that are out there doing cool Star Trek games? I would love to get connections with all of them. And it's just a matter of figuring out who's the right belly button to reach out to and touch so that we can start having these conversations.
Belly button. So Chris, I'm going to let you put it on the universe right now. What do you want to do in the future? What are some of your aspirations to write for and do? Put it in the universe. You never know who's listening.
Well, the funny thing, I was actually funny. I was actually talking with one of the coworkers at my 9 to 5 about this, because usually the funny thing is like I work for my full-time job is I do medical billing, and I work for a local health system here in where I live here in Missouri, and my coworkers, they know what I do for a side job, and they absolutely love it. In fact, the CEO of the company is a massive Star Trek fan, so I mean, he loves hearing about the stuff I got coming out. But we got to talk, and Star Trek and Marvel are 2 of the 3 fandoms that I hold like the most dear to me. The third one being Transformers. I would love to do a Transformers project, and obviously, I mean, Renegade. Hello, but
I'll send that over to Jackson Lansing. I know him and Colin Kelly did the launch for IDW.
Nice. But yeah, I would love to do more with Marvel. I would like to write some stories. I mean, I mostly do reference books for Marvel. I'm writing about what's happened rather than writing what's happened. Mm-hmm. There's tons of, the Marvel universe is huge. There's tons of characters I'd love to write a story about. And that's one of the things I absolutely love about like getting to work on Star Trek Adventures is I've done reference material. I've done lore breakdowns. I've done character bios. But Star Trek Adventures has allowed me to write stories through either because I've written 2 adventures. I've written over a dozen mission briefs. It allows me to like stretch those muscles in like, basically like story structure and getting to write dialogue. I mean, when I worked on the operations division book, I wrote dialogue for Worf, Jim Kirk, Miles O'Brien. I mean, I never would. I mean, and when we're doing the stuff with Marvel, we're basically writing encyclopedia articles, which we're basically writing it in, and I not knocking what I do for Marvel, but it's very encyclopedic writing. It's almost fictional nonfiction. So I'm thankful that with you guys, I get to kind of stretch my narrative muscles a little bit more and my dialogue muscles a little bit more. Mm-hmm. I would love to do anything that gets me writing more stories. I'm down for, regardless of what the franchise is.
So you put in the universe. So now someone might hear it and bam, you never know. If Jim taught me anything, is just put it out there and you never know what'll catch.
Yeah. Well, that actually that ties back to something you were both talking about earlier, and I was just enjoying listening to you, so I didn't chip in. But where you were talking about how instead of necessarily going to look for a comic book company to go work for, just start developing your own stuff because you're passionate about it and you love it. I mean, that's it right there. If you love to write and you love to write story, then do it. Like, this is the best time ever to be an independent writer and a self-publishing writer and fiction, because there's so many venues to get your fiction out there, whether it's like Wattpad or you actually just publish it on ebook and go to Kindle or go to Amazon or go to what are all the other Smashwords, all the different services that are out there. It is so easy now to be a writer, to get your stuff in front of people who will read it, as opposed to letting it just sit on some editor's desk or have to go through a profit and loss statement at a big conglomerate or whatever, that they're going to kill it anyway, because that's just the way that it's so stupid. But like, if you love to write and you love to tell stories and you want people to read them, then there's a very low bar at this point to do it. And if you do good stuff and you're passionate about it, someone's going to notice it and they're going to find you and they're going to reach out to you and they're going to say, okay, we saw this stuff, we love it, I want to hire you to do stuff. Like I do that sometimes with Star Trek. I know other people have done it, and that's just like, your passion will come through no matter what you're doing. Just get yourself out there and don't worry about the marketing and all that stuff. Just, be passionate and let your stuff work. Let your stuff speak for itself. Anyway, so that was a bit of a digression. I
think it's relevant. You always say you're digressing, and I'm always like, that's so relevant, because I think people, one of the things for this podcast is about celebrating the fans. And I don't care who it is. The fans, if you're standing in line at Comic-Con or any con, they're coming up with all these amazing ideas. And there's ideas and then there's execution, right? Putting it in writing in a blog or some form. And so I really want to encourage people, because Chris, again, since I interviewed you back in 2019, I was just super impressed because your passion for all the genres you like are so evident. And I'm the kind of person where I'm always trying to drive people, like, just get it done, write it down. You never know what it'll take. And so I love that you embody that, portion of a writer and artist.
Absolutely. And so Chris, I get a feel like we're starting to kind of wind up here, but I did have one more question for you. It's related to the question that Michael asked you, and sure. It will sound totally self-serving because it totally is. But if there was, especially because you just mentioned that you would love to write a story and you would be really excited to work on something that gives you an opportunity to work on like more story and stuff. Like, just thinking about Star Trek Adventures as a game line and knowing your passion for Star Trek, like, if there was one product that you wanted to work on for Star Trek Adventures that we haven't done yet, that is like in your brain, that would be just like drive you crazy. Like, if I were to email you one day and say, hey, Chris, we're going to work on X, and it would just like literally blow your mind and you would be super excited to work on it. What is that dream project for Star Trek that you would want to work on?
Ooh, wow. I've actually had some thoughts about this.
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that I noticed when I was reading through I can't remember if it was the player's guide or the GM's guide, but doing this thing about like cinematic cinematic adventures.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of wondered if there would be a way to do a series of a multi-generational epic campaign, something that like started in the Enterprise era and then continued to TOS and then to TNG and then Picard and then even into like the 32nd century in current Discovery. Yeah. Something where you basically like you take your characters and you run through this adventure and then you create new characters. Or basically you can either like do analogs and then or however you want to do it, and give your players a chance to like explore different character archetypes in the same campaign. So you're basically okay, you're right now you're United Earth Starfleet when this story begins. And then the seeds go into the original series, and now you're a 23rd century Federation Starfleet crew, and then 24th century, and then 25th, and then 32nd, and basically just make this I immediately realized that somebody has done this. There was a video game called that I'm ashamed to admit that I have and I completely forgot about called Star Trek Legacy. That kind of does that because it basically takes you through a multi-generational adventure, but it's mainly about ship combat. It basically gives you the opportunity to basically do like kind of broadside ship battles with every generation of but like making it more character focused rather than just the throwing two ships at each other and see which comes out not blasted to bits.
Yeah.
So
would players be required to create crews for each different timeline and a linking story?
Yeah, or I would probably offer like options. There might be a way to basically like we could even like because we have like a department, we have Starfleet has the Department of Temporal Investigations. Basically, you could make the characters like DTI agents based on a ship that has to basically like navigate through these multiple time periods. They're basically chasing a mystery through the millennia, basically. So I mean, you could do like make a different crew for each adventure, or you could or there could be a way maybe the crew from the first adventure somehow time travels to the next one, and it's about them having to chase this through the decades. Because it's making it and have to deal with the political landscape and the cultural landscape of these different eras of the Star Trek universe and how that might affect how they have to tackle this problem.
Sounds like DTI would be chasing them the entire time.
Oh yeah.
I like it. I mean, it sounds we played with this a little bit with the Shackleton campaign, where we started it off in the original series and then we continued it into next gen. But like taking your idea, like it would be super easy to expand that concept out into something even bigger, where you're at the very beginning with Cochrane in watching the Phoenix go up. Right. And then you've got to bounce to the 32nd century. And where's the Federation? The Federation's toast. And now they're starting to rebuild. And then you bounce around to the temporal Cold War. You bounce into the next gen. There's all kinds of possibilities there. I love the high level concept. I think the devil would be in the details, of course. Like, how do you make that work? And what does that look like? And but I love that. I love the idea. So no, that's really cool, Chris. I appreciate you throwing that out there, because that's much more ambitious than I was expecting you. Which is cool, right? I mean, I love it, and I know that there are like fans really enjoyed Shackleton, and I thought that would keep him happy for a while, because it was like a 320 page behemoth of a book, And like almost immediately, because fans being fans, they were like, that came out, and they're like, okay, what's next? What's next? It's like there's no way you've run through that whole campaign in like a month or whatever. There's no, that should have been like 2 years worth of content right there. But they're hungry for more, and they want big campaigns. And it's like, well, the challenge with big campaigns is that they're expensive, right? Those big hardcovers are not cheap, right? And it's a lot of entertainment. Like you think about RPGs and their value, right? Like the amount of entertainment you get for one book is significant, right? Especially if we pack it full of story potential, right? But big campaign. I'd love to do something like that. Even Al Spader has been bugging me for a while now to want to do a multi-ship campaign at a convention where you can have like 4 tables going, doing different things, but they're all related to the big story. So like they all run their individual 2 to 3 hour session, and then they all come together for a big session at the end. And I'm like, I love the idea, but just like logistically, how do you make that work? And haven't cracked the nut on that yet. And I don't know when we'll get there, but that's just a cool idea that he's been pushing for a while now. And I'm like, yeah, you're wearing me down, but like, I need to see how would that work in practice? And I know that, Modiphius certainly is still growing, and we just don't have the infrastructure in place to do like really big organized play type of stuff yet. I know we're working on it and we're getting there. But that's another kind of like related dream concept of like, how do we make these really cool, like you were saying about Jackson, where he was running 2 campaigns, one Klingon, one Federation, and then they came together. It's like, I've heard other game masters talk about that, and it's like, oh man, that's really cool. But just like logistically, how do we make that work? So Michael, I apologize. I think I cut you off at one point.
No, I was going to say, side note, there is one Star Trek Adventures super fan, and please text me or hit me up when you see this video. I forget who it is. They claim to have played every single module in Mission Brief. And I'm like, wow. Wow. And I told them I got to have them on the show at some point, but they claim they've somehow, even if they haven't played the full module, they've used something from everyone. So that person fascinates me, and I will definitely be digging into their brain at some point.
Yeah, that's a gold prize right there, because we have got to be pushing on 250 discrete stories, if not more at this point. I know we've done more mission briefs and we've got more coming, and we got the Lower Decks book coming out now, which has mission briefs in it. So that's a lot of story. Like
I want to know who this person is, because whatever they did become wealthy and stay home and play RPG all day, I've obviously made the wrong life decision somewhere. So I need to know this person.
I want that kind of time so that I can do this kind of thing, and then I can also play. I would love to do that.
Wouldn't that be great? All right, cool. So I think we're at our gratitude moment. We go around every show and we talk about gratitude. My gratitude is actually going to be to everyone who was so nice to me when we started continuing missions and accepted interviews. So that includes you, Chris. I think about Ian Lemke. I think Marco Raffaella. I think about Aaron Paulier, Troy. These are all people I met initially. The Bridges, Tilly and Susan. Like, just the fact that Dayton Ward. I remember Dayton Ward. I freaked out when he actually accepted an interview. Scott Pearson. And I just want to just thank all the creators out there who understand the importance of the little bloggers and stuff like that, and keeping paying attention to the fans, because I'm always going to be the ultimate fan geek, fanboy. I'll always feel that way. I always have imposter syndrome when something comes out. And so I just really appreciate you, Chris, for accepting the interview initially, and Jim, of course, because you're really giving a voice for so many different artists and creators. So that's my thank you today, Jim. And then let's do Chris, and then we'll finish with Jim. Mm-hmm.
My gratitude. I got three entities I would like to give that to. First off, to Modiphius and the entire STA team for basically taking on a rookie at RPG writing and taking them into their circle and allowing me to contribute to not only this game, but to a franchise that I have loved since I was very young. Also to the players of Star Trek Adventures who, if you found any value or enjoyment in any of my contributions to the game, thank you so much. I can't express my gratitude enough. And lastly, on a personal note, I'd just like to say thank you to my daughter Nicole, who I told I was going to be doing this, and she's a big YouTube person. So I mean, she's going to be thrilled to see your old man on
Yay!
Hey.
So, awesome. So Nicole, I love you. I hope I didn't embarrass you too bad.
Kids love it. They hate it when it happens, but I still remember my dad screaming "I love you" when he would drop me off for school. And at first you cringe, but now looking back, I'm like, that was the best thing that ever happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Jim, go.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. Well, I'm gonna. Gosh, not to sound self-serving, but Chris, it's been such a long time since I've talked to you at Gen Con. I got to thank you for being such a steady freelancer and steady hand on all the work I throw your way. You're consistent, you're good, and that's all I can ever ask for in a freelancer is to be communicative and consistent and good. And you've risen to every challenge I've thrown your way, and I always want to give you more, and you always find ways to have time in your schedule, and I always appreciate that. Michael does the same thing. It's like you guys never say no, and it's like I don't know if you ever would, which is okay. That's a good problem to have. But I mean, you are one of the. I'd have to go back and look at the credit pages, but I think you're one of the few freelancers who've been on since the Division books. I think you and Fred and maybe a couple others. I apologize everybody who's watching and listening that I don't remember. It's just there's so many products and names to remember, but you consistently delivered for a long time now, and I'm grateful for you day in and day out, because I know, like, when I've got a project to work on and I've got to find the writers to work on it, it's like I got some very reliable people that I can trust that will get it done, and I don't really have to I don't mean this in a negative sense. I don't have to babysit them. I don't have to kind of shepherd them along. Like, I can just give them a thing and they can go off and run and do it. And I got the confidence that when it comes to the deadline or even earlier, because you guys are consistently early, I'll get it. And sometimes I feel bad because I don't always have time to give you notes and then do revisions and then go into approvals and stuff. But like most of the time, you guys, especially you, Chris, you deliver such clean drafts. It's like, oh, I just need to make a few tweaks, and maybe I'm not great on my feedback, and I can work on that. I'm grateful that you have been here for a long time, and that you are steady and reliable, and that as an editor and the project manager, that's worth its weight in latinum to keep it in franchise, and I'm grateful for that. So thank you for being here. Thank you for loving Star Trek the way you do, because it comes out in your writing. The fans notice it, I notice it, and that's why we keep coming back to you for more work, because it's there, the passion's there, and again, grateful for that. So hope to give you lots more work here in the coming months and years. I know we've got a bunch of products in the works right now that you've been working on that we haven't talked about yet and that we haven't announced yet, but that'll come in due course, and more to come. So hopefully you'll be willing to continue to come with me and Michael and everybody else on the ride for as long as we can make this happen. So grateful for you. And then of course I would be remiss if I didn't thank all the fans. Like I said, we talked about at the top of the show. Lower Decks was announced today. The fan response has been pretty overwhelming. I think this is one of the first, other than maybe Utopia Planitia, this is the first release where I've actually felt parts of today where I felt kind of overwhelmed with just how much positive energy was coming out of the woodwork. It was the subreddit, it was Discord, it was Twitter, it was Facebook. It was like 8 or 9 different places online where I was seeing all this stuff happening. And I was so pissed off because my day job blew up today. And I was so busy on my day job that I couldn't really, I didn't have enough time to really get on social media to
Jim, tell them what happened. I woke up West Coast time, and it had been released. Jim, tell them what I'm sure I want your perspective on what was I like when I woke up totally confused.
You were giddy and confused because it was like 5 a.m. And we had the opportunity to get the exclusive with StarTrek.com for 2 hours. And they released the press release at 5 a.m. Pacific time. And like Michael emailed or texted me, and he was like, "What's going on? I can't keep up. What's happening?" And he was all confused. I'm like, "Oh, this is happening. It's all good." And he's like,
I fell out of bed. My wife's like, what happened? I'm like struggling out of bed with my phone. My eyes aren't focused yet. Yeah. I'm like, what's all my friends are texting me. I was totally bewildered. I finally said, I'm getting off of text for like an hour just to catch up because I was totally overwhelmed.
Take a break. It's all good. But yeah, so the fan response has been really, really positive to Star Trek, specifically Lower Decks. But the fact that we brought Lower Decks into the game line finally is really encouraging. And we would not be doing this if it weren't for the fans over the last 7 years. So thank you all you fans so much for your support, for playing the game, for getting on Twitch and YouTube and all those other ways that you're playing the game and sharing your experiences with other people, because that is what's getting people into the game more than us talking about it, right? You said it yourself, Chris. You were watching Shield of Tomorrow, and that's what really got you loving Star Trek again on a weekly basis. And we've had Shield of Tomorrow on the show, and we've told them how much we love them and how grateful we are. And again, it's the fans watching that stuff and then sharing it and picking it up from there. So we're doing this absolutely for the fans because we're fans too. We're sharing it. We're doing it for the fans. We love the fans. We love Star Trek. So thanks everybody. And this is going to sound weird, but I also want to thank, and this is kind of weird because like they'll never see it, but like I know for a fact that there are fans playing this game, enjoying this game, buying this game, who are not even online, right? They're not engaged with the social media. They're not engaged with the newsletters. They're just out there, out in the world, buying their games from their friendly local game store or from Amazon or from whoever. And they're meeting every week or every other week playing the game. And we just don't know it. There's just like this shadow group of gamers that are out there. Because like I know that I've done the numbers, and the online presence of the game is very small compared to the numbers that I've seen. That are probably playing
so you're saying I should take this show on the road and find those gamers?
Find them. Yeah, they're out there somewhere. I want to know who they are.
I travel quite a bit. I may have to start like jumping in on sessions or finding people. This has been interesting.
Awesome. Did Nimoy host that show In Search Of? So.
Yeah, exactly. Where are you?
I love this. All right. Well, Chris, again, I'm just so happy that you were able to come on the show finally after so many years and share your talent with us. So really appreciate that. You coming on. Thanks so much.
Glad to be here, and I'm available anytime. This has been amazing. It's been great to talk to you guys.
We will have you back definitely for the Lower Decks release and all the stuff in the future, which we can't talk about. LD was the most torture for me this year, not talking about, by the way, because people kept asking about it. And so now finally that it released, I feel like I can sleep tonight, which is cool. But
the big weight has been
relentless. Oh God, because everyone kept asking. It was horrible. It's like not being able to say anything. So that's fantastic. Yeah. All right. So until next time, everyone, IDIC.
Live long and prosper. Be safe. Be well. Talk to you all real soon.